we begin tonight with Trump facing a backlash for his July 4th celebration tomorrow. Critics saying he is politicizing the holiday and the United States military. Here's what we know so far. The tanks are already on the National Mall. You can see them in this video right there. The Trump White House is under fire for issuing special VIP tickets to the RNC while ignoring the Democrats, a political move not typically seen with July 4th celebrations, despite the Trump administration saying that it is a bipartisan event. Also, the National Park Service had to divert $2.5 million to cover the event. Trump still owes D.C. $7.3 million for his inauguration. The district's mayor talking earlier about how unusual this is. Watch.
The city has not been repaid $7.3 million of the costs from the Trump inaugural.
Right. And that's unusual. We don't know what our total local costs will be. If we have extraordinary police costs, for example, we will seek that reimbursement from the federal government.
So Trump has ordered the country's top military leaders to stand beside him during the celebrations. Flyovers by Air Force One and other jets will cause Reagan National Airport to ground flights for 1.5 hours. Critics saying Trump seems intent on mimicking the kind of military event favored by dictators like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un. Protests are expected. We might see an appearance from the Trump baby blimp, last seen during a protest in London. And finally, Trump will give his speech on the steps of, yes, the Lincoln Memorial, the very same steps where Martin Luther King Jr., as you see right here, delivered his iconic, as we well know, I Have a Dream speech over 50 years ago. And yet tomorrow it'll be President Trump on those very same steps in front of that monument. In a moment, I'm going to be joined by MSNBC military analyst Colonel Jack Jacobs and Tim O'Brien, who are in studio with me, executive editor of Bloomberg View and author of Trump Nation. But we're going to start with Congresswoman Eleanor Holmes Norton, who represents D.C. and actually helped organize the March on Washington as a young activist. Congresswoman Holmes Norton, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Very much appreciate it. I first want to start with your thoughts on Trump giving his speech tomorrow in the same location as we just saw as MLK over 50 years ago.
Certainly. The mall is, any president can go there. No president has gone there, particularly on occasion like July 4th or Veterans Day. That space is almost seen as sacred space in D.C. Yes, Martin Luther King was there, but it's hard for you to name anybody else who's been there. And certainly no president. One thing we don't want to do is to politicize, much less militarize, that area. And I must tell you, the March on Washington did just the opposite. It brought everybody together. What the president is doing now on the ball is splitting us apart. I hope he will reconsider it. When you see tanks on the mall, leave aside the damage it does. In this country, we have been spared war. That's why there's no Bastille-like celebration here. And essentially, that's what he's trying to do here. He couldn't do anything for Veterans Day, so he's trying again on Memorial Day. And all he's doing is attracting controversy.
It's actually interesting because Nixon actually made an address from the steps of the Lincoln Memorial just 7 years after the March on Washington. So it seems that as if then President Nixon made this decision to make a speech there before President Trump. What does that say to you?
For that matter, there have been occasions, and they've almost all been very special occasions where when one of these holidays the president has spoken, for example Harry Truman, on the 175th anniversary of July 4th, Clinton at the turning of the century. But there has always had to be a very special occasion. And here they didn't dominate any holiday. They simply appeared and left the holiday to the American people.
I want to bring in my other guests, Colonel Jack Jacobs and Tim O'Brien. Thank you guys for joining me here on set. Appreciate it. Colonel, I'm going to start with you on this one. One associates military parades with countries like North Korea, with countries like Russia. And we know the president was inspired by the military parades that he's seen in those countries. He also was inspired by the military parade commemorating Bastille Day in France when he was visiting with President Emmanuel Macron. What do you make of the president's decision here to celebrate the 4th of July the way in which he is?
Well, it's a bit ironic to surround himself. This is a guy who who dodged service in Vietnam, dodged service, period, to surround himself with the trappings of the military establishment, who are providing these things reluctantly, by the way, I might add. I've spoken to a number of people who say that they are really reluctantly providing these assets. The interesting thing about this is, as you mentioned, there are tank countries, Russia, China, North Korea, and there are non-tank countries. We're a non-tank country. We've got lots and lots of tanks, by the way. We've got something like 1,300.
So what do you mean by that, then? What do you mean we're a non-tank country?
If you are really strong, if you are genuinely strong, you don't have to demonstrate that you're strong. And those who are weak, generally speaking, parade this stuff around. We don't have to do it. The fact that we're doing it is very troubling.
Yeah, it is such an interesting point, Tim, because when you see a military march in North Korea, it is very transparent as to what they are trying to exhibit to the world. There are often times where we question on air while we're watching these military parades, and I think I've actually been on with you, Colonel, when we've seen some of these military parades, in which we say we don't even know if these missiles are real that they're rolling out in North Korea, because they want to show the breadth of their strength, right? They want to show to the world what they have, because what we know well about North Korea is they have basically no economy, right? They're closed off from the rest of the world. So all that they have, it seems, is their military, right? And that's where they gain their pride from. And yet here we are, the United States of America, with the strongest military in the world, the leader of the free world. And yet we are having a military parade just like a country like North Korea.
You know, Trump tweeted earlier today, he said, you know, tune in tomorrow to the 4th of July. It will be the greatest show ever. And that's about as much of a key as you need to what his thinking's about. Donald Trump does not think strategically. He thinks theatrically, and he thinks cinematically. He had outfitted his guards at one point in Trump Tower in the early 1980s. In military garb. He has always loved this idea of projecting power through toys, through uniforms, through all the surface things that people who are actually confident with power and know how to project real authority don't rely upon, including senior members of the U.S. military who are deeply uncomfortable with this event. I think the other thing to think about that, and Jack hit on it, is that Donald Trump avoided service he got 5 draft deferrals to keep from serving during the Vietnam War. No one in his family has ever served. There's no one in the Trump family up and down the line who's ever served. It didn't cross his children's minds. And I think there's something really troubling when I think the commander-in-chief is enthralled with the projection of power and pomp and circumstance, but doesn't actually associate that with the sacrifice that's involved behind it.
By the way, I might add one thing. We're not talking about watching an armored division trundle down Independence Avenue. There are 2 Bradley fighting vehicles and 2 M1 Abrams tanks in stationary exhibit. That's it. And so that's what he's doing. He's surrounding himself with the trappings.
They're like stage props.
On the steps of Lincoln
They're like
Memorial,
stage props.
mind you. It's interesting that you bring up some of the people that you've spoken to in the military, Colonel, because the Defense Department has actually put out this kind of message to many of the service members that are going to be serving tomorrow, that are going to be sitting along some of these tanks. We have not obtained this, but Mother Jones has obtained this. And it says basically it's asking these service members to say that they are proud to serve this nation and proud to be a service member. Meaning if someone walks up to you and says, what are you doing here? You know, what does this tank say next to you? Then you say, I am proud to serve the nation. I'm proud to be a service member. I am proud to honor the nation and the armed services during the Independence Day celebration. It tells people to make positive statements. Don't use acronyms or jargon. Don't say anything that you want to be heard or recorded. Don't guess, lie, or speculate. I mean, it is instructing people how to talk and what to say to individuals that they're going to be encountering on the mall on July 4th.
These are people isolated away from their units, standing around.
But also encouraging them to be positive. If you are a service member of the United States of America on the 4th of July celebrating, why would you have to encourage these service members to be positive unless, in fact, they were reluctant to be there in the first place, jumping off of what you said earlier?
If you go approach any service member of any service 9 times out of 10, in any circumstance, you're right, 9 times out of 10, unprovoked, they'll tell you he loves.
Absolutely. Every time I speak to a service member, they love what they do and they're happy to serve. And yet, why are they being encouraged to stay positive on a day like the 4th of July?
Because the Trump administration is profoundly worried that this event won't go off properly. They're worried that he's not getting enough RSVPs from VIPs to sit with him and his family in front of the Lincoln Memorial. There's a very strong chance the numbers could have that same kind of Inauguration Day hangover where they didn't get a big turnout on the mall. They're very worried about how Trump put this together at the last minute. The White House, the military, and everyone else involved had to scramble to make it work.
Congresswoman, there's this idea that this could feasibly turn into a campaign rally type event tomorrow, considering who the president has decided to surround himself with, considering that the invitations have just been put out to members of the Republican Party. What do you make of that?
Well, you have special tickets for the RNC. What more could you say? The president has announced that he's running again. Therefore, he has to be very scrupulous about his appearance at events. There are 2 events that he's tried to appear at: Veterans Day, now Memorial Day, which have been reserved as classic nonpartisan, non-political events. He is turning them into political events, and I'm sure disappointed that in this DMV district, Maryland, Virginia, remember where he is. He would have to almost surely attract people from this jurisdiction. They're not used to coming to this place. They're used to going to the foot of the Capitol and seeing fireworks. And my own prediction is that's what they're going to do this time. But remember, this event starts in the middle of the day and goes for almost 12 hours. Who do you think is going to come out for all that time?
Especially when it's about 90 degrees or so in the middle of the day in Washington, D.C. I've been in that heat. It's not comfortable.
Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.